The rain started suddenly, as it often does in late October. Large, heavy drops lashed against the asphalt, turning it into a black mirror where the reflections of streetlights and neon signs trembled. I stood under the awning of the Neon Centaur bar, wrapping myself in a thin autumn coat that felt absolutely useless against the damp, piercing wind. What an idiot. I should have dressed warmer. I saw the weather forecast this morning. The last customers had left half an hour ago, leaving behind the smell of craft beer, tobacco, and cheap cologne. I wiped down the tables, put up the bar stools, and counted the till under the watchful eye of our tired manager, Bill. Now that the shift was over, that heavy, dragging exhaustion hit me. The kind that builds up after 12 hours of running around with trays. "Go on, Jules. What are you waiting for?" Bill threw over his shoulder as he jingled the front door keys. "Is your boyfriend picking you up? It's pouring out there." "He was supposed to," I muttered, instinctively pulling out my phone. The screen remained black, despite my frantic tapping. Damn it. Right. The battery died right after lunch. Swamped by the rush of orders, I completely forgot to plug it in. And here's the result. I can't call him, and I can't order an Uber. Andy's text came through this afternoon, when the smartphone still showed signs of life. "Got pulled into an urgent business trip to Boston for 3 days. Can't pick you up. Call a cab. Sent you money on Venmo. Kiss." Warm words, but right now, they offered little comfort. It was almost midnight. Rain, an empty street on the outskirts of town. A solid 40-minute drive home. The night buses around here ran once an hour, if they ran at all. I pulled up my collar and stepped out from the awning. The freezing rain immediately got to work, soaking my hair and running down the back of my neck. I started walking toward the bus stop. The street was empty. Only the occasional pickup truck sped by, splashing me with dirty water. And then, as if in answer to my silent prayer, a yellow silhouette appeared in the distance. The car was moving slowly, unhurriedly, like it was looking for someone. On its roof, a faded, checkered sign with unevenly glowing red letters. Taxi. A wave of relief washed over me. Without thinking, I threw my hand up and stepped to the edge of the road. The headlights blinded me for a brief second, but the car smoothly rolled up and stopped, its old wipers screeching against the windshield. The door swung open with a dull creak. "Good evening, sweetheart. Jump in, or you'll get completely soaked. Where are we heading?" I dove inside and slammed the door. The interior met me with warm, stuffy air, smelling of stale tobacco smoke, sweat, and something else. Sweet and musty, like the basement of an old wooden house. But that didn't matter. The main thing was that it was warm, dry, and this old Ford Crown Victoria was going to speed me to my bed. "Oh, this weather is an absolute nightmare. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver. I need to go to Maple Street, 45. Third entrance, please." The driver nodded, shifting the gear on the steering column. The yellow Ford pulled away smoothly. In the glow of the dashboard, I got a look at him. A stocky, dense man in his 50s, with a thick black moustache and hair graying at the temples. Massive rings gleamed on his thick fingers. When he turned to cast a glance back, gold crowns flashed in the light of the street lamps. His smile was wide, even hospitable. "Not often you see folks out on the street in weather like this," he said, returning his eyes to the road. "You work around here?" "Yeah, at the bar," I answered briefly, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell in the car was thick. It enveloped me like a second skin. "Tough job. Drunk crowds probably hitting on you." "Happens sometimes." I stared out the window at the familiar streets floating by. The rain turned the world into a blurred watercolor landscape. The streetlights stretched into yellow streaks, the lights of a 24-hour 7-Eleven melting into a colorful blob. "Don't you worry, girl. I'll get you there in a breeze." The car turned off the main avenue toward my neighborhood, but for some reason, it took an unfamiliar route, down some dark, unlit back streets. I got nervous almost immediately. "I think we're going the wrong way." "Road work back there, sweetheart. It's a detour." The driver waved his hand carelessly. "I know a shortcut. Don't you worry." I nodded, but a heavy feeling of dread stirred somewhere deep inside. A couple of minutes passed before I managed to pull myself together. Exhaustion, nerves, the darkness outside. It was all just playing tricks on my mind. I looked out the window again. The landscape beyond the glass felt wrong. The houses seemed to be losing their sharpness, their edges blurred, as if I were looking at them through a thick layer of murky water or frosted glass. The familiar gas station on the corner seemed veiled in smoke. Its bright logo now glowed dimly, like a dying star. "Cold, sweetheart? I can turn up the heat," the driver said. "No, I'm fine," I replied, feeling goosebumps race down my spine, and clearly not from the cold. I stole a glance at the driver. He sat there, swaying slightly to the rhythm of the car. His thick fingers drummed on the steering wheel, and suddenly, he fell silent. He didn't just stop talking. Even his loud, wheezing breathing disappeared. A profound silence filled the cabin, so deep it made my ears ring. Only the howling of the wind outside and the hiss of tires on the wet asphalt. Unconsciously, I raised my eyes to the rearview mirror and froze. There, in the reflection of the dark back seat, sat silhouettes. Indistinct, blurry, like shadows cast by a candle flame. They sat motionless, staring straight ahead. But I felt the weight of their gazes on me. Icy terror paralyzed my freezing body. With great effort, I turned my head. The back seat was completely empty. Only my purse lay right there. My heart started hammering wildly, slamming against my ribs. I looked back in the mirror. They were there. The same silhouettes, but clearer now, as if someone was sitting right next to me. One had a neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Another seemed to be weeping silently, its face covered by its hands. The third just stared at me from the looking glass, with empty black voids where its eyes should be. "Are you comfortable?" the driver suddenly asked, and his voice sounded so close, as if he had leaned right up against my ear. I flinched, shrinking back against the door. "What? Yeah, I'm fine." "Good." He smiled into the mirror again. His gold teeth looked like a predator's snarl. "We'll be there soon." But we weren't getting there. The minutes dragged on, turning into hours that shouldn't exist. The road outside the window lost all its landmarks. Sometimes silhouettes of buildings flashed by, but this wasn't America. These were grim, looming structures with empty eye sockets for windows, their crooked roofs reaching into a low, leaden sky. Sometimes figures stood on the shoulder, motionless, facing the highway. It felt like they were following the car, with gazes I could feel on my skin. "Where are we?" "On the road, sweetheart. Where else?" the driver replied. He wasn't looking in the mirror anymore. He stared straight ahead, and his face had turned to stone, completely stripped of that fake southern friendliness. I want to get out. Pull over, please." "Can't do that right here, sweetheart. Dangerous to wander alone at night. Bad people out there." There wasn't a single drop of human warmth left in his voice. Only the cold grinding of metal and a smile. That same golden smile, frozen on his face like a painted mask. "Pull over right now!" I yanked the door handle. It wouldn't budge, as if it had been welded shut. The driver slowly turned his head toward me. Not his whole body, just his head. It twisted at an unnatural angle. His neck snapped loudly, like a dry branch. That sound echoed in my mind. "Shut your mouth. Sit quiet. We'll be there soon." I pressed myself deep into the back of the seat. A sharp, uncontrollable panic rose in my throat. "Breathe, Julie. Just breathe. It's a nightmare. You're falling asleep from exhaustion." I tried to comfort myself, but the cold leatherette, the smell of rot and sulfur, it was all terrifyingly real. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was something unnatural. I looked at the driver, at his thick hands gripping the wheel, and my gaze instinctively crawled downward, to the pedals. I saw his feet, or rather, what was in their place. Where work boots should have been, there was something dark, covered in coarse, bristly fur. At the ends weren't feet, but hard, black, cloven hooves. They pressed down on the pedals, and with every push, there wasn't the squeak of springs, but a dull, hollow thud of bone. I blinked frantically. Maybe I'm imagining it. No. Holy shit. Those are actual hooves. The whole world shrank into a single point of freezing terror. The strange city, the shadows in the mirror, the endless highway. It all came together into one monstrous picture. This isn't a taxi. I'm in a cage with the devil. Into my head rushed the scary stories told by my great-grandmother, who grew up in the deep woods of the Appalachians. Stories about the force that roams the crossroads of night highways, picking up lost souls. The taxi to nowhere. It drives those who get into a stranger's car at night and drives them around until they lose their minds from fear. So that's whose silhouettes I saw in the mirror. And suddenly, like a flash, my great-grandmother's voice rang in my memory. Sitting on the porch of her old house, she'd say, "Remember, Julie, the evil from the woods and the crossroads. It's wicked, but it lives outside our time. If it attaches to you, if it tries to drag you away, tell it, come back yesterday. It confuses them, breaks their logic. They run from that mix-up like a bat out of hell." Right now, Those 3 words were my only lifeline. The yellow Ford was tearing down an absolutely straight road, disappearing into a black void. On either side stretched a lifeless wasteland with dead trees. The driver spoke again. A sticky, sickly sweetness crept into his voice. "Enjoying the ride with me, sweetheart? We could see each other. I could drive you anywhere you want, to beautiful places. So, what do you say?" He turned back to me for real, with his whole body. His vertebrae cracked with a deafening snap. His neck stretched unnaturally long, bulging with black veins. His smile stretched all the way to his ears, revealing not gold crowns anymore, but rows of small, sharp, yellow shark teeth. His skin became pale, stretched tight like parchment. His tiny eyes glowed with an infernal yellow light. Nausea washed over me. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms until they bled. The pain sobered me up. I sat up straight, stared right into those blazing yellow irises, and said, clearly, separating every word, "Come back. Yesterday." The effect was instantaneous. The sly smile slid off the creature's face. Its features twisted with wild astonishment, mixed with fury. It jerked its head. "What? What did you say?" My cheeks flushed with adrenaline. I screamed louder. "Come back! Yesterday!" The driver's face started melting. His skin darkened, splitting into deep cracks. His eyes flared with a crimson fire. An unearthly roar erupted, filled with such rabid malice that the Ford's windows rattled and covered with frost. The car roared and lunged forward. The world outside turned into a black vortex. We were violently thrown from side to side. The cabin reeked unbearably of sulfur. The shadows in the back seat began to thrash, reaching for me with their appendages, but as if afraid to touch. The creature at the wheel, having entirely lost its human form, gripped the steering wheel with bony fingers, ending in black claws. It muttered curses in an ancient, dead language. I pushed myself deep into the seat, screaming like a mantra. "Come back yesterday! Come back yesterday!" The squeal of brakes deafened me. The car spun around. I was violently thrown against the seatbelt I hadn't even noticed before. Silence. We were parked at the exact same bus stop where I had gotten in. The rain was still drizzling in the lamplight. The neon sign of the bar glowed about 20 yards away. The passenger side door swung open by itself with a loud click. I didn't think. Instinct threw my body out of the cabin and onto the wet asphalt. I didn't look back, left my purse on the seat. I just ran. Ran like I never had in my life, tasting blood and freezing air in my lungs. Only after running a couple of blocks and tripping over a curb did I risk turning around. The street was empty. No yellow cab, no smell of sulfur, just rain-soaked America and a lonely stray dog pressing itself against a brick building. I ran the rest of the way. The key was shaking so hard in my hand that I could barely get it into the lock of my apartment. Flying inside, I locked every deadbolt, threw on the chain, and propped a heavy armchair against the door. I turned on every light in the house and huddled in the corner of the couch, pulling a blanket over my head. I shivered uncontrollably until dawn. I listened to the hum of the pipes and the creak of floorboards, expecting the red taxi sign to flare up outside my window at any second. But nothing happened. In the morning, When the sun flooded Boston with normal daylight, the trembling faded. Life outside the window went on. Cars honked. People rushed to get coffee before work. The world became real again. 3 days later, Andy came back. I threw my arms around his neck and burst into tears, muttering nonsense about a yellow taxi, sulfur, and hooves. He stroked my hair for a long time, convincing me that it was just sleep paralysis and hallucinations from severe overexhaustion at work. He made me see a therapist, buy vitamins, and get sleeping pills. Over time, the memories really did start to dim. I convinced myself it was stress, the dark playing shadows, and some creepy freak behind the wheel of an old clunker. The brain always looks for rational explanations to keep from going crazy. But I don't walk at night anymore. And if I need a ride, I only use verified apps on my phone. And I always look at the driver's feet before getting into the car.
Scary bedtime stories.